I'm Andrew Thomas Price and welcome to the brand new Bushcraft and Survival Skills magazine video series. In this episode, I'll be looking at how to prepare and how to light a fire using the bow drill method. Now this is exactly what I'm looking for. So the first part of the process of fire lighting is to collect kindling, or primary kindling, which is about the thickness of a match and maybe slightly thicker, but it has to be perfectly dry. What we need are sticks that are off the ground, so things that have fallen from trees above, or what we call dead standing, so it's still attached to the tree, but it's perfectly dry and you can hear that lovely crisp crack when it breaks. So I need to get a good bundle of that, about enough that it requires 2 hands to hold, and that should be just about right to get the fire started. The next stage is secondary. So the secondary kindling is about the thickness of a pencil, up to about the thickness of my thumb, and also bone dry. Now you can hear that lovely crack as I break it here. Totally dry on the inside, so that's exactly what we're looking for. Now the reason we work up in stages is I look at fire lighting very much like building a house. So you wouldn't build a house by building the roof first and working down. So you start off with a good foundation, a nice bit of dry tinder, then your primary kindling, then you work up to your secondary kindling, and by the time this stuff is burning, you should be able to start burning your main fuel wood. So we get a good pile of this and we should be good to go. Now we're getting somewhere. So I've brought some really dry tinder with me. This is Malinia grass, which you find growing on heathland all over the place, really. Great stuff, burns really well. So the next thing I need to think about doing is making my bow drill set. Get a nice dry piece of wood as the baseboard, and I've chosen a nice piece of dry ivy here, which is one of my favourite woods for the job. And these are all woods that you can find in the British environment. I also need a nice straight piece of dried out hazel. So this was found as a piece of dead standing. So that makes a great drill. So the combination of these two should give me a fire. Now the tool I'm using to do most of this work is the Orbe axe by Hultafors. So it's a Swedish made axe, really high quality, and should do the job just fine. And always work on the far end of the log. So what I don't want to be doing is working here where I could slip and catch my leg. So I'm going to work right over here. Also keeping my fingers back away from the edge of the axe. And a good axe like this does most of the work for you. It's really just a kind of pendulum motion, letting the blade come up and down like that. So there's not a lot of force going into it. I've flattened one section, I'm going to flip it over and go the other way. When this is complete, this will be the hearth board, the very base part of the fire lighting set. So this sits at the bottom and we drill down into it. So I've got it nice and flat this side. I'm going to flip it over and I'll do the same this side. The next thing I need to do is just get the roughness off the edges, and then the baseboard is finished. So I'll just get that done. There we go. Like most creative arts, it's often a matter of deciding where to stop, and I think this is my stopping point. So I've got it nice and flat here, and it's about 2.5 centimeters wide, so that looks about right. So the next thing I need to do is make the drill. The most important thing is that the drill is straight. So what I generally do is look along it. It's a little bit like looking down a pool cue. If there are any wibbles in the drill at all, you can just shave those off and make it nice and straight. So this is pretty good already, but I'm going to take a little bit off this side. I also take the bark off because the bark tends to get quite polished and it will cause the string to slip. So I'll remove the bark at the same time. The thinner end I'm going to turn into the bearing surface end. So I'm going to make a point at this end, and I'll use the knife for that as well. So always cutting away from myself like this. Okay, now the principle of this end is to reduce the amount of friction at the bearing surface. So I'm just going to create a blunt point at this end, and then the other end, which is now flat, I'm going to round that off as well. And there we have the finished drill. Now all I need to do is take this back to my camp, put everything together, and hopefully we'll get a fire. The other thing I need is a bow. Now this doesn't have to be anything particularly fancy. Any piece of wood that has a nice bend to it like that is fine. It's not a bow and arrow, so it doesn't have to be flexible. You also need a strong string. So survival, you could use something like your bootlace or draw cord from a jacket, something like that. You can also use natural cordage, so that's something we'll be covering later in the series. Now the final part we need to think about is the bearing surface. Now this is crucial to the success of this technique. So we need to make something that allows us to control the downward pressure and to hold the whole thing steady while we're working it. So you could just use a piece of wood, make a hole in it, and then lubricate that with something. It could be something like lip salve or candle wax or soap, if you have those with you. If you don't have anything, perhaps have a wiggle in your ear, see if you can get some earwax out, stick that in there. Now, the worst case scenario, if you can't find anything, look under a rock, try and find a little slug, mash him up in there, and it stinks, but it works. Where we are is really close to the coast, and nature's best bearing block in the world, it really is the best, is a limpet shell, and it allows the whole set to spin very, very easily like that. So this is pretty much what we need, and just to finish it off, a little piece of bark which is forms an ember pan. It allows us to collect all the dust as it forms, and then we can transfer that to our tinder bundle, and we should have a fire. So now I'm ready to make a start. Now the first thing I need to do is, using my knife, is just make a small depression in the surface of the board. I'm making this depression in the board just deep enough that the end of the drill will stay in place and start to work its way in. So now I take my drill and I need to wrap the string around it. So you notice the string isn't tight at the moment, so that allows me to drop the string on top of the drill, give it one good twist, and then you have it looped once around on the outside of the string. That's under a lot of tension, so if I let that go, it would go whacking straight into the camera, so I won't do that. But what I will do is take my bearing block, get that in my left hand. Now if you're left-handed, you'll just reverse everything I'm doing, and get your left foot on the board. So your left foot goes on there, that holds everything steady. I take my bearing block in my left hand, put the end, the pointed end goes into the bearing block, and then holding everything together, I just put the blunt end of the drill into the depression that I've made in the hearthboard. So by maintaining loads of contact here, you can just get your shin bone right into the crook of your wrist here, and then I'm ready to make a start. So I've got a really solid platform to work with. Now I'm going to slowly start moving the bow forwards and backwards. Try not to get too much up and down motion if you can. And I'm just maintaining enough downward pressure that I can keep the end of the drill in place. Now we can stop there, and this is the point I need to look at the set. Most importantly, we need to look at the dust we've created, and the dust should be very, very fine and jet black, or very dark brown to black. Now the problem we have, if we carry on drilling into this, all of this dust forms around the rim of the crater here, and it cools down and we'll never get a fire. So what we need to do is to create a notch. That notch allows all of that dust to collect in one place, and that's what gives us our fire. So I'm just going to get rid of that for now, and I'm going to cut a notch into the side here. I use the knife for this job rather than the saw, because I find if I use the saw I tend to go in a little bit too far and you kind of have to start all over again. So I'm just going to use the knife. It takes a little bit longer, but I prefer the end result. One of the things I really love about this particular technique is it's ancient. This is quite possibly the oldest method of controlled firelighting that humans have used. The sounds that I'm hearing, the smells that I'm getting from the set, they're all smells that my ancestors would have been familiar with. So this is a real direct link to our heritage, our past, and that's one of the main things that we all do bushcraft for. And there you can see it's not a pointy notch, and it doesn't go quite to the center of the circle. I normally stop a couple of millimeters away from the center of the circle, because if I continue right to the middle, you end up with a little point on the end of the drill, and that can sometimes cause it to skip out. In a survival situation, energy is everything. We don't want to waste it. So we check the entire set to make sure that we only have to do this once, and that includes making sure that the string isn't frayed, and we check as well, make sure the drill is nicely straight. Doesn't have any mushroomed off end at the bearing block end. So this is all looking really, really good now. Now I'm going to start moving the bow forwards and backwards. So if you hear that horrible high-pitched sound, you can very easily get rid of it just by pushing down a bit harder. So now you're getting plenty of friction, loads of smoke. So I'm just going to use my knife just to support the ember. That's looking quite good. I'm going to get my tinder bundle nicely set up. It doesn't have to be loose, it should be a nice dense pile of dry grass. And we always say with your ember, don't do anything until she winks at you. So as soon as you see that red, it's all ready to go. So it's a nicely glowing coal there. So I'm going to slowly transfer this hot bundle of hot dust into the center of my tinder bundle. There we go. Wrap it up. In order to get a fire, you need three things. You need fuel, which is our dry grass. You need heat, which we've got from the friction of two pieces of wood rubbing together. And the last one is oxygen. So while I catch my breath, I'm just going to make sure that we blow into here. So now that we've got our flame, the next thing is to slowly build this fire up using the driest and thinnest of our primary kindling. So I'm just going to start adding a few bits to begin with. And once we've got a few pieces of our primary kindling going, we can then start adding a lot more. All my primary kindling has been consumed, it goes in seconds. And now I'm starting to add all my secondary kindling, which is the thicker wood, and this will start to build the fire. And there's already a tremendous amount of heat coming at me here. So from a survival point of view, even a fire this size is actually enough heat to keep me warm. So it's quite an incredible thing. Once all your primary and secondary kindling is burnt away, it's time to start adding your main fuel wood. And as long as you keep adding wood, your fire will keep going all night long. And that's it, in a nutshell, the bow drill technique. It's a superb, very effective fire lighting technique. It can work for survival purposes or just about any other time. And if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and follow our future videos on the Bushcraft and Survival Skills magazine video series.